what we can do now, because you folks need to leave a little early, we'll have a look at the chemistry work that I've done, and then we'll do the potentising probably after lunch or something like that. Now, I guess the best place to start is from here. Now this, I'm sorry these don't have the page numbers on it, but you know. Okay. 34. 44. Now, we got this yesterday, and we found this is what is here. And as I say, you know, when we're looking at this idea of these three worlds, or these three primary energetic structures, because, you know, the galaxy has its own vibe, the solar system has its vibe, the Earth has its vibe. And grander water. Do you guys come across this grander water movement? Well, it's 10 years ago or something now. And this was a device that was basically a metal box, and the water came in and came out, and there was a tube in the middle. And they had, when you talk to people what's in there, they said it's these three frequencies of water. And it was like, well, what's that about? But now I look at that and I can say, and they said, and they did say it was about the galaxy and the solar system of the Earth. And so this is what they're doing. They're actually getting these three real resonances and putting it in there, and then as the water comes through it, it's being influenced and therefore helps with plant growth.
And one of the things they say too with those devices is they do run out. So they potentiise it.
Yes.
But they said over time
it gets weaker.
And weaker.
And that's why it's died out as a movement. Because they weren't cheap, were they?
No, they were very expensive.
Yeah.
And you can get them for water and electricity.
Yeah. So anyway, you know, just the reality of these three spheres. And so this is the rules of the first sphere, and this is the rules of the second sphere. And we'll come to the third later. But we then did this game where we joined these together and we get this sort of picture taking place. And what that did was showed us the energetic activities of these different places in the circle. And I played around with this for 10 years. Everything seems to happen in 10-year groups. And it was just about walking around the circle and feeling, is this what's going on? Is this what's going on? All this sort of carry on. And so I had this. And it was really just trying to work out some sort of glossary for biodynamics, all these terms that Steiner used at that time. But then you know, as I said, the biodynamic preparations in their homeopathic form for things like insect control appear to work for 3 weeks. And we can see this. I was living in a place and I had a little garden there, had brassica in there, and I was travelling around, you know, and I'd come back once a month to this place. And so I had this, was it broccoli? And so the plant was protected, so we had all good big leaves, and I'd come back, you know, after a month, and the centre was being eaten out, you know, so I spray it again, and then we'd have the big leaves, and I come back, and the centre's being eaten. And so we had this plant that was sort of like this, you know, just showing it was 3 weeks that this was lasting for, you know. And so to me that's not enough, you know, it's a pain in the neck. You can't, you know, that you have to, especially when you're looking at things like, you know, rabbits and birds even and stuff, you know, we'd like this to work. And I've got to say that we make up a rabbit remedy, and we had rabbits on our property, and I sprayed it once and we didn't have any more rabbits for 3 years. And we drove down through our neighbour's property, rabbits, always, but we had no rabbits on our place for 3 years. And other people have had that experience as well. With our possum spray, this guy rings me up one day and says, "Oh, about 8 years ago I bought some possum stuff from you and we used it and it worked really well, and now we've moved to another property. Is it going to be any good? Is it still going to work, after 8 years?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd expect so. Spray it and see, and if it's not, get back to me." Well, I've never heard from him again, so it's still working. But basically, he only sprayed it once and it worked, Whereas at Caroline's house, when I first met her, she had a possum problem, and we found that it was every 6 weeks that we actually had to apply it. So it varies from place to place and all this sort of stuff. But, the idea is that we want to just spray things as least as possible. And that's my attitude with homeopathy. The trials I run is to show me how little I need to use rather than how often, how least number of times I can use the thing in the season is what I'm after. And so the point being is, how do we make things stronger? That's the question. And Steiner made this comment that we can, if we want to make things stronger, we use the chemical elements. And so when you read Steiner's stuff and Hauschka and Julius and all these other Steiner writers on chemistry, basically they're talking about 20 remedies, 20 elements. And they're all in this top part of this chart, and because they're non-toxic, most of these things like nitrogen and phosphorus and all that are relatively non-toxic. But things like potassium and sodium will burst into flames at room temperature, So this whole question about chemistry is, first of all, we can only buy 20 elements, and they're only safe to use in that amount. So what about all the rest? That becomes a big question. So that's a different solution. So the point was, I said yesterday, we come to the periodic table of elements, and this is how it's presented. That we've got these 8 primary arms of major elements, and then we have this whole group in the middle here of trace elements. And then down the bottom here, we have the rare earths, lanthanoids and actinides. And then, we actually have 7 layers in this story. And so it's like, well, this is interesting. When we come to look at chemistry, the simple picture is that we have 3 groups of elements. We have the major elements, the transition elements, and these rare earth elements. And I told the story about how I found it very difficult to go from trying to imagine calcium as a spherical thing, back to the rectangular chart, back to a sphere, back to the rectangle. Why don't we just make it as a circle? And so when we look at these 3 different groups of elements, what we actually see is that there's 8 of these, there's 10 of these, and there's 14 of those. So if we look at them as different, as individual groups of elements, then, from music, we know that there's a difference between the 4th and the 5th and the 7th and the 3rd. They're all different vibratory tones. And, the 4th we feel a little bit of discord with, the 5th we feel pretty comfortable with, and so on. So that they're different qualities. And so it's sort of, this is my artist sort of going, well, let's just make each of them their own group and see how they sit. And so here's our 8 major elements, and here's our 10 groups of trace elements, and here's the lanthanoids. Now, the first thing I observed with this is, gee, look at the hole in the middle here. You know, there's no elements there. There's no elements there. You know, that becomes a sort of observation. And of course the issue is, okay, we've got these 8 arms, but how does it sit on the circle? You know, we could put it in any direction whatsoever. And you know, and it's sort of easy. There's a few easy sort of things you could say is, okay, here's the first group of elements, the first row or whatever. And having done astrology, the beginning of the astrological chart is the eastern horizon, the ascendant. So we could just put that there and just run everybody else off. So I had that thought first day, but it was like, well, really? Is that, you know, it's a bit of an abstract association. Is that real? And so I didn't know anything about chemistry, of course. So I had to go through a process of sort of getting some sense of what each of these groups of elements are and how they're working and all that sort of stuff. And so again, that was like 3-4 years of plodding around doing that. And eventually I came to this point that yes, that first group of elements do sit on the ascendant here. And then we can sort of mark them off. And, you know, going back to that picture where we've got all the energetic activities, it was sort of like, well, we can just put that on top of there now, and we should therefore be able to identify the energetic activity of every one of these elements in regards to their physical reality, you know, because we know science has got lots and lots of information on all these elements, as does homeopathy, by the way. You know, they've got really good pictures on all of these elements. So there's no shortage of information that we have to apply to this study. And so, okay, we sort of come to this point that we can put these elements on the circle like this. And of course, the obvious next step is what happens when we put them all on top of each other. Because we've sort of got them in so that reference, we can just put them on top of each other and see who relates to who. Now, I'll just have to sort of flip through here a bit. So this is the picture that, I'm not sure what page you've got on that. Does anybody? 47. And so we start putting these groups of elements together, and, you know, just the things that come out are really quite fascinating. You know, over here, you know, this is the internal etheric arm. And here's the etheric ring. And so this is the most etheric point on the chart, the etheric in the etheric area. And we have calcium sitting there. And this is what we were saying, that calcium is this element that is only here in the form we have it because of the metabolism of life processes. It's come from life. And here it is sitting in the most life strengthening point of the whole chart. And sitting right next to is copper, which again is totally associated with fertility and you know, the ability for life to come into form. You need the good copper. 59. Rare earths. Yeah. Well, that's the same. It's all as one. I just put everything, all the information on one diagram.
Because this is south and the colours are
North, yeah. There's quite an important point here that we can divert into for a minute, is that astrology is developed in the Northern Hemisphere. And so all of our culture, which is European, looks to the south because the sun goes over there like that, and so they orientate to the sun. And so everything is looking there, so therefore the east is off to your left hand and the west is over there on your right hand, and we're all going to the sun. But chemistry works off the Earth's magnetic field. It's an electromagnetic reality that responds to the Earth's magnetic field, so we have to orientate off the Earth and the magnetic north, not the sun running across wherever it wants to run. So this is quite an interesting little thing, that we're changing our orientation. We're not focusing on the sun, we're actually focusing on the Earth. And I found this quite an important sort of shift in my whole sort of being, really, that you know, I'm sort of coming, it's like I'm coming into practicality, I'm coming into what's real, rather than this sort of abstract thing which is orientating everything off the movement of the sun. And so because I came from astrology and everything, I of course had everything pointing to the south. And then when I started doing chemistry, I sort of, we've got to go off the north here. And so in about 2010, I started just doing everything off north. And so that's why I'm and you know, it flips, because we're looking at the sun there, right? East, west. We're turning around and we're going to there. So now that's east off that hand and that's west. So, you know, there's this sort of orientation shift. But as I said,
in the southern hemisphere, is that
anyway,
naturally anyway?
what we do anyway. So it's easy for us.
Yeah.
So we're right.
We're right. Yeah. We're lucky that we're sort of in that sort of process. But this is a big head twist for the Northern Hemisphere people. And you know, because I've got into this whole circle culture, I've started looking at how those megalithic circles and stuff were orientated. And it's quite fascinating that there's this mixture. Some are orientated off north and quite a lot are off south. Like the American medicine wheel culture, that's all actually orientated off south, all of that. You know, so there's quite a lot is orientated off south, but there are some that do have this northern orientation, regardless of the seasons. So it's interesting, really. So a lot of these later pictures are off north, and so I've made an effort to put north or south just to get clear. Okay, so the deal is that once you start looking into all of these different planetary chemical placements, they actually do fit with their sort of energetic activity. And I guess the biggest feather in my cap was that in 2001, Hugh Lovell and I, with Greg Willis, by the way, were invited to do a seminar in Oregon, Marricksville or something like that, in Oregon. And so Hugh and I got to stay in the same Airbnb for the weekend. And I'd already sort of come across Hugh in the BD Now email list that started in 1997. And so this was like, we'd been talking to each other for 4 or 5 years on the internet, so we sort of knew each other to some degree. And but my chemistry by 2001 was in this form, and so I put it under Hugh's nose, here, have a look at this, And it took him 10 years, which is, it's going to take everybody 10 years, by the way. But Hugh, being a very good biochemist and into the agriculture and so on, he started prodding it and playing around with it. And I don't know when, but at some point he actually stood up and said, you got it, bro. This is actually all of my biochemical experience and understanding keeps proving what you're saying. He's saying that, and I've got a couple of places, like in the chemistry book in particular, I've got these emails from Hugh where he's sort of... I came to an advanced course in New South Wales, and after that he emailed a couple of the attendant guys, and he gives this really good story of how he got it, about the energetic activities working at these different levels, but he sort of adds in his own sort of biochemical information and so forth. So that was, good that Hugh, came out publicly and really supported this. It's really sad that Hugh died.
You can ask him questions.
Oh yeah, I still talk to Hugh. It's not a problem, but it's really nice when someone else is standing up there saying, "Hey, this is good stuff, by the way." That's a really helpful thing. But anyway, that's the best I can say there is Hugh likes this and saw the reality of it. And the more I've worked with all this, of course, the more it keeps proving itself. And I'm quite sure that this is good. And so we just, in a sense, this is art. What have I done here? I've just made these simple steps, where we've got 3 groups of elements, they're different numbers. Let's put them in their own group, being a bit musical. So we've got a 4th harmonic, a 5th harmonic, and a 7th harmonic. So let's put them separately and see who they are, how they sit, and then, why not put them on top of each other? Boop, 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 boop. What do we get? Here's the picture. Now, not knowing anything about chemistry, it means nothing to me, this picture. It's just a picture. And so I then had to start living with this picture and just what's the reality of it. And over time I get more information, more knowledge, more experience, and it stands up is then what we come to. And so it comes down to this fact that we can now predict the energetic activity of all of the elements of chemistry. So I'm not going and reading a chemistry book and learning what sodium is or does. I'm actually telling myself what sodium does, rather than getting something else. And when I read that other stuff, it's sort of, how does it fit into this? Because they're looking external and they're saying, well, we can see it does all these things and it has all these characters. Whereas in this situation, we're coming the other way, going, we see this has this energetic activity, and how does that energetic activity manifest into all of these things over here? And this is the same story that I have with homeopathy, traditional homeopathy, as opposed to Steiner's homeopathy. Because this is Steiner's language. He's talking about when we look at some element, what is the energetic activity of that element? And so we're going to look at an illness, and a homeopath is going to say, I see a sore throat, I see a running nose, I see tingly feet, I see whatever that is, okay, and I see this herb over here, it does all these same things, so therefore that herb must treat that remedy. That's homeopathy. It's an external, symptom-based, observational, A plus B equals C. Okay, let's use it. And if somebody else does it, yep, 200 years later, that's what we use. Why? Because it works. That's it. That's their reasoning. They do it because it works. As to what is the energetic problem that you've got in front of you here and how are you going to solve that energetic problem, that's not always any of their consideration. It can be, but it's not always. It's just we know that whatever does whatever. Whereas what we're getting an opportunity to do here is we're sort of looking at, okay, we've got all these symptoms. What does that tell us about the energetic problem that we've got here? That's what biodynamics is asking us to do. And we're given these frameworks of reference to be able to identify those energetic activities. And then it's a case of, okay, we've got that energetic activity. what is an expression of that? And we're looking at the biodynamic preparations as an expression of that, but the question then comes, how do we do that to chemistry? And so using this pattern, we've been able to identify those energetic activities, and I'm now sort of slowly working on cell salts, which are just this very simple system of 12 salts based on sodium, potassium, magnesium and calcium, and chlorine and sulfur and phosphorus. And so, you know, we've got the 3 systems and the 4 bodies. It's sort of like it's made for biodynamics, the cell salts. But we have to bring it into this reference system, and there's a still debate there, which is fun, but I haven't quite got it ended yet. Okay, so this is how I came up with the picture. That it was essentially an artistic process, and but because I'm using archetypal law, all the references are coming out of archetypal reality, the likelihood of this thing being true is high. And then I spent, you know, years playing with it, working with it, taking them, you know, putting them on plants, giving them to Hugh, you know, go for it. And so we feel pretty stable about this. Now, just as an image, a friend of mine who is a dog groomer had this dog, small dog, old, 15, 16 years old, and he was getting mites in his paws. And they'd been to the vet and tried all the poisons and nothing worked. And so she said to me, you know, what would you use? And so the thinking process is mite, insect, astral, blood sucking. So this is the spirit. There's a spirit activity there working at this sort of astral level. And so when we come into this picture here, we've actually got this internal astral process taking place here. And when we're looking here at this spirit ring, what we've got is actually all these remedies here. So there's actually 8 remedies that we could sort of look at. Now, right at the back of the book there's this thing called the circle of everything. Because of course the thought is, if everything is actually a sphere, right? Everything is an energetic sphere. And that's this sort of point of this sort of thing, is in a sense that's what everything is. The planets, the galaxy, us, everything. We're just this energetic field that's spherical, torus through the middle and all that. And so if we slice through the middle of that and we get a circle, then, you know, a circle is resonating with everything in creation. You know, right? Because, you know, this is the pattern of everything in creation. So if we just slice that through, then we've got a circle. So therefore, every circle is resonating with everything in creation. And that's why, therefore, if this is a archetypal order, therefore we can find this order in every circle, orientated off magnetic north, by the way. And so it doesn't matter whether it's a circular table, or we can say, look, here's a circle here. There's the middle of it, right here. And so we've got this circle just running around here. And you know, so this is organising that same energetic activity. Not quite sure where I was going with that.
We're talking about the dogma.
Oh yes, right. And so in that circle of everything, that's right, that was the thought, that, you know, if everything organises in a circle, then we should be able to find everything within the circle. And so in that back picture we can see that in this quarter over here, in this etheric quarter, this is the plant kingdom. Over here on the physical, this is the mineral kingdom. This is the animal kingdom, and this is the human kingdom. You know, it's sort of like, okay, that seems to make sense. And so if we have this as the animal kingdom, then I sort of saw that, you know, here's the spirit, here's the astral, and when you sort of look at how the species sit here, then we actually have insects sitting about here. And so we've got this sort of, in a sense, smaller beings coming up to bigger beings, coming up eventually to the mammals here. And so if we're looking at a mite, a small insect, then we would tend to be further down that scale, you know, if we look at small to larger. So it sort of said holmium. And so I said to her, you know, holmium is what I would use, because we're getting that spirit blood-sucking insect vibe. And so she used one of these pictures. She had my book, and she just put a small bottle of water on that spot, and I don't quite know how long you need to do that, because I haven't really done enough testing of that. But the shortest time I've done is 10 minutes. And there's a story around that, which we won't bother with at the moment. But so 10 minutes, and it had the effect I wanted. So that's the shortest time I've done. It may only be like a minute or so. Like we were playing this game yesterday at lunchtime, and the water sat there, 2-3 minutes? And so I asked her if she felt anything that came from that, which was undetermined.
Is there a name for that process?
Of,
you know, bringing what you need into the water through the table, and, you know, symptoms, etc. So using the mite as an example, and that lady making her medicine for her dog through the table and the water. Is there a name for that?
not really, because I've made it up. I'm calling it glenopathy. Just as I call my chemistry Glenological Chemistry. You know, it's my logic, you see. It is a logical process, but it's my way of doing it. No one else has done it that way, so own it, you know. Because, of course, biodynamics don't want to know anything about this. Which is sort of really weird. Sorry? It's a rare earth. Yeah, it's one of the rare earths. So, you know, we've got a 10 ml bottle like that. I might as well do this for us right now while we're here, just to show you what we can do with this.
Where's the water from?
Okay. As I said before, that I use distilled water, and that's because it's empty.
Yes.
It's, you know, there's nothing in it. When you use rainwater, you actually have quite a lot of nitrogen, as well as aluminium, strontium, borium and silver. But you have a lot of nitrogen in that, so it's not actually a passive water. And then, of course, any kind of town water is full of garbage, but bore water is full of all these other elements. And often a lot of iron and things like that. So if you're using those waters, which if I have no other choice, that's what I'll use. I'm always the best you can do. That's the rule. And if
Boil them up to make them distilled or whatever?
Oh, well, you can. You know, if you've got town water and you've got chlorine and fluoride in there and you boil that up and try and get rid of that, sure, do that. But I just use the best I've got. And I learnt this from parenting. You know, I had 3 kids sort of by myself for a period of time, and I got it that there's always more needed. You can never fill the need. And I just had to go, well, that's it. I've done my best. And that's all there is. And there's no karma beyond that. As long as I've done my best, that's it. And that's my attitude, you know, with homeopathy and with everything, is just do the best you can with what you've got at the time, and that's it. No debate. So basically I've made up these sort of meter things, and I know people wanted some from the last workshops, and I haven't organised them because I'm a bit slack on those things. And believe it or not, I had a guy locally to do it, but he had some odd, he needed a particular program file type that I didn't even know what it was. So, okay, so this is what we can do, is put that there, and of course, here it is. So I have a compass, and I just put that on the middle there so that I can get north, which is sort of there, like that. And in this case, you know, holmium, we just put that there like that. And, okay, leave it. And so I leave it for as long as I can. If I'm in a rush, you know, 10 minutes worked, okay, I'll leave it 10 minutes. If I'm sort of going to put it into a product or something, I'll usually leave it for 24 hours. I used to believe that you needed to put it in the sun, you know, bark flower remedies. This is what we're basically doing, making a bark flower remedy, which needs the sun, but I found that doesn't matter. You can be in shade, it can be nighttime. Because we've got neutrinos running through here, and we're sitting in the Earth's magnetic field. That's what we're using. Our motor is the Earth's magnetic field. And so within a circle, the Earth's magnetic field will make this organisation. That's the thought. And so we leave that as long as we want. And so she then got that and put it into the water of the dog, you know, for that next week, and the mites went away. Now, of course, this little old dog, when he went to the park, had small man's disease, and so he would fight with all the other dogs at the park. And so once he started taking this, he didn't. Because what are we looking at here? We're looking at balancing out the way the astral and the spirit are working together. Now, when you've got the spirit properly incarnated in the middle of the circle, then you're calm. You don't have to prove yourself to anybody. You're just cruising along in your own cool space. And so when the spirit gets excarnated, then the astral body starts running around, you know, and the small man's disease becomes a real issue, you see. So if we're going to pull the spirit into this character, then it calms down. And he went through quite a strong psychological change, that he just, you know, calmed down and became really relaxed, and, as well as the mites went. But as I say,
a repetitive thing, or she just do it once?
I believe it was just the once. And she's done a few other things on dogs that have, you know, there was one, what was it? I think she used this over here because we can put the planets onto this, and basically we start with Saturn up here, and it goes Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury here, Moon, and then back up here the same, Moon, Mercury, Venus. And this is a bit of another story, but we probably won't get there. So Venus, what was it? It was this Rottweiler type dog that was super aggressive, and nobody could cope with it. And so they were about to put it down. And so Lindy said, oh, well, let me try this. And so she placed him with a new family, and then they started treating him with neodymium. So it's this sitting here. So this is Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon. And so Venus, of course, is our sociability, our sort of way of getting on with other people, and therefore it governs relationships and art and lovers and creativity and all that. and the whole personality of the dog changed. Just calmed right down and became sociable, and was stayed with that family, you know, so it wasn't put down. So yeah, that was something she did by herself. She worked that out herself and just sort of went and did it. So yeah, there's.
Where you order one of those circles? Though?
Well, you can, but I actually don't have any. Well, it's one of those things that I do want to happen. So at some point in the near future, it will happen. That's why I tried to encourage Nina to do it. Nina Bray from down Noosa. It's pointing up here, yeah. North is pointing up through here.
So what is it about?
Sorry?
So what is the point of it going north and your remedy on this side?
Oh, well, we're just orientating the circle, but we've got Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon. That's what sort of happens. And there's a picture in your book there that has this.
When you cover that one, Glenn, we might break for morning tea.
Okay.
Continue on with this.
Yes, that's right. We can do another session on this.
There's north, east, south, west on the actual.
There's north, east, west is there. North, south is through there. Well, it's saying that. It's saying it's up there. Yes.
And essentially, like, it's not, you know, it's east, west, north, south, and just a little bit over that way. So what you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Another one. Yeah. Because the compasses get affected by all sorts of little magnetism and stuff, but yeah.
And we're talking magnetic north too, because Melanie just reminded me of that. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah. Magnetic north.
The Earth's magnetic atmosphere is changing.
It does.
So it changes all the time. You align it to magnetic north.
Yeah, on the day. And as I'd say, if this is how the field is functioning here, you know, even if the Earth field is here, but because of whatever's going on, the field is actually here, then I would use this, because that's the field. And, you know, keep it real, you know, just what's real is always...
Is there a reason for the 1 metre or whatever it is?
No, not at all.
So it could be done at any size.
Any size.